Section number 2 is hearings, and the first item is item number 6, and it's C36. This is the semi-annual review and report on conditional use permit compliance for on-sale alcohol beverage establishments citywide. And we'll have the staff report, please.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. So we're providing the information for the semi-annual review of on-sale establishments for the period from January to June. The data was evaluated based on the modified process table per Commission and Council direction, which also added the ABC violations as a specific category with a threshold of 2. Over that 6-month reporting period, there were no occupant load violations. Of course, with increased code enforcement staffing, you can see that the number of code violations has increased. We noted in the staff report that Silvio's and Hennessy's exceeded the threshold of 3 solely due to the code violations, but we did not recommend CUP review due to a lack of land use impacts. In the staff report, we also reported that 3 businesses had several instances of serious crime indicative of lack of adequate security. However, upon further review of the incident reports, the police chief has determined that only Hermosa Saloon's reports indicate a lack of adequate security, exceeding the threshold for possible review. So Hermosa Saloon is now the only business that's recommended for commission discussion as to whether set a hearing for possible CUP revocation or modification. Another option would be to provide direction on additional information that you'd like to look at next month. We also received a supplemental from American Junkie, which you've been provided. The police chief is here to answer any questions also. That concludes my report.
Pam, I have a question. You said that there was 3 originally that had exceeded the threshold. There's actually 5 that have exceeded the threshold. And why wasn't Silvio's or Hennessy's brought up as exceeding the threshold when it's clearly above the threshold?
So yeah, technically there were 5. We didn't recommend that originally that the other 2, Silvio's and Hennessy's, be looked at due to the lack of land use impacts. So while you could say that code violations are land use impacts, there really weren't any community compatibility or criminal crime types of impacts. So on that basis, we didn't make a recommendation. Of course, that's for the commission to discuss. Well,
and that's a good point, because one of the things I want to discuss, and it's not going to happen tonight because it's not on the agenda tonight, is that we have a criteria by which we raise things, and here's 2 establishments that should be raised according to our criteria, and we're saying we're not going to hear them, and that's why I'm going to recommend later on that we need to, as I did before, we need to review this whole process, because, as I just said, there's 2 establishments here that have exceeded the threshold, and yet far exceeded the threshold, and yet they're not even mentioned. But in any event,
could I respond quickly to that? Sure. Just that we did bring it to your attention, and it's up to you to make a determination. So you certainly have the authority to decide that you do want to have a hearing.
Okay, but if you look at our criteria, if you look at the bottom of it, note A, it says that the chief of police retains the authority to recommend CUT review. So you're telling us we have the authority, but we really don't have the authority because it's on the chief's hands right now.
No. That's not that.
No, the police chief has the authority to recommend that you look at an establishment, but you have the ultimate authority to set a hearing. Okay. So it's really your authority. The police chief weighs in heavily, so to speak, on perhaps a recommendation, but it's really your authority to set a hearing to modify or revoke a CUP.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Sure. Well, she could do it with 1 as opposed to waiting until accumulation of 3 or whatever. I had a question about that, about the same thing though. The code enforcement actually was not one of our criterion, and it's on the supplemental and so forth. Was that as the result of direction from the council, or I'm not, in other words, there was never anything on here about hosing, for example, as a category that would have prompted this, because at least when we drafted this initially and adopted it, we were looking to those issues that really were driving the complaints and driving the concern. And, well, I think we all agree, but there's a code enforcement process for things like that already.
Actually, based on your, I'll speak to this. I mean, I'm looking at attachment 1. The criteria includes violation of any CUP condition. It includes outdoor encroachment permit violations, building code violations.
Back up, I'm sorry.
So
Yeah, no, I know
we're
that.
following we're following the policy because these violations are either CUP violations of CUP conditions, and specifically, I think the ones that are referenced for a couple of establishments are outdoor encroachment permit violations.
And so the hosing is stipulated as an outdoor encroachment part
Well,
of the
yeah,
CUP?
Well, and plus CUPs also have a condition that any violation of any code's violation of the CUP. So that's where it's
sort of
linked.
second hand, okay.
But Ken, it kind of seems like we say any violation of a CUP will get a point.
Yeah.
Yet we're saying, but none of those really matter. So what's the point of?
No,
I don't really understand why we're even talking about it. And
We're
that's
certainly saying they matter. That's why it's on that attached
Oh,
list
okay.
of-
So when we see the planning commission right now, what you're saying is that we have two establishments, Sylvia's and Hennessy's, that might have had a violation of their CP .46. We can vote to call a hearing on those places.
That's correct.
Great, thank you.
I have a question. I didn't know.
Well, we're asking questions of staff right now,
Yeah.
right? I have a question of staff on Silvio's. They have 4 furniture, plaza, and hosing. Can you go into any detail? What are those? When did they happen? What time of day? Was there 1 hosing and 3 furnitures, or were they in the front or in the back?
That's my question.
Okay. And likewise on Hennessy's, so they have 6 furnitures. What time of night did it happen, each one? And what I'm driving at here is, if this happened in the early afternoon or in the early morning, who gives a rip? If it happened at 10:30, we give a big rip, okay? And so if I had 6 violations of furniture on the at Hennessy's at 11 o'clock at night, that's a significant thing. If it's at 11 a.m. in the morning, that's not. And so do you have any detail on that?
What, could you describe what you mean by furniture? Is it like a stool or a table or all the above, or?
Yeah, I think it's usually placing furniture outside, say out the back door, so that they can use the inside area for some other purpose. I believe that the citations probably have more information. We don't have those with us, as I'm assuming to time of day and so on. And so I don't know. You know, I guess you're indicating possibly if something happens when no one's around, maybe that's not a problem, but it, is still an issue if it's still a violation. So we don't really try to say, well, it happened when no one's around, so therefore it's not an issue. Just it happened or it not.
Where I'm going with it is if it's happened at 11:30 at night, that's a significant issue. And I would say there's no question there should be a CUP review. If it's happened at 11:30 in the morning because they want to clean the floors, that's something entirely different. If we don't have that information, then all we can do is table that till the next meeting. But I think it's very significant, and I think that I've watched at least our current mayor, who this is a hot button of his, and he's been out at night perusing. And if it turns out that Silvio's has 4 violations at 11:30 on a Saturday night, that's significantly different to me than if it happens at 10:30 in the morning. And I would absolutely bring them up for a CUP hearing if that were the case.
What does hosing mean per se?
Usually
It's on here, but they say furniture on plaza and then hosing. Are those 2 different conditions?
Yeah, usually hosing is, say, hosing off the floor mats outside in the public realm, and then the water runs off the property and the storm drains and so on. So you're supposed to maintain all the water on your property or within the.
Is that
confines of
illegal
the
to wash stuff down the way they're doing it?
Yes, if it's cited.
Okay, that's illegal.
So really, anyone that does anything that water flows off their property, whether they're washing their car, washing mats, water's overspraying from sprinklers, et cetera, is not legal.
So how do they clean their stuff?
They usually have a mop sink, so they should be doing it in a manner where, yeah, it's not, they're not closing
Okay,
off.
all right. And then the furniture means they're just moving it anywhere to make more room. Is that what that is?
Yes.
Okay, so they're moving it out of the way so they can do other activities.
Yeah, usually it's stacked outside in the rear.
Well, actually, I think these cases were that was stacked out into the Pier Plaza area.
Do you know the time, Ken?
But I don't know the time.
All right.
The intent of this stage of the review, that would be a completely new direction for us to give you that level of detail on these. But I mean, it's certainly something we can
Well,
do
I
in
mean,
the
I think
future,
everybody would agree that moving furniture out at 11:30 at night is different than moving it out at
Yeah.
11:30 in the afternoon.
Yes.
You're giving me a puzzled look, like you think that
I
it's the same.
I don't necessarily agree. I mean, we're trying to have an equitable, fair approach to this, and that puts a
Well,
lot
the
of, that
people
puts a
here
lot
that-
of subjectivity into it. If you
Well, the
ask me.
people here that live in town, our concern is the late night, not the early afternoon. But I have another question of staff. On background, item number 2, it says, staff has informed the establishment the need to cooperate with the authority. What does that mean? I think we asked them to cooperate with us something like 2 years ago. What does that mean when they say that they're going to need to help work with us?
So the auditor that we hired and us, we've informed the business, the establishment, that they need to step up and cooperate with the auditor. And we have an email to that effect, and he's given them a deadline till the end of the month, so we'll see where that goes.
Is that any different than the multiple other emails that the auditor has sent him over the course of the last year and a half, asking him to do the same thing?
I guess we'll see whether he gets results this time.
So I guess where I'm going with this is that, if I were him, my history has shown me that I don't really have to do anything. And what is the action that will happen a month from now if he says I don't want to do that?
The action will likely be, we will report this to you at the next CUP review if we have no progress in that audit.
Well, just for the record.
And
if-
that will be something that will be for your determination.
What's the penalty for this?
There's no penalty.
No,
No
they could
penalty,
have
so
they
they
could
could
have a
do it-
revocation modification hearing based on the fact that he's not cooperating on his audit. I mean, that's
So, I mean-
what we've found to be the most effective remedy we have.
So just so everybody knows where I'm going with this, if it's not done by the time you said at the next meeting, I will be asking for a revocation hearing on the establishment. We've waited a long time. You've given them an email, and that's where I'm going with that. Okay, but any other questions of staff?
No.
Okay, we're going to open the public hearing right now, and anybody who wants to speak on this matter can.
I think the chief of police.
Oh, well, why don't we let the chief go first, yeah, if you don't mind. I'm so sorry. She worked all day.
No, I don't want to interject, but obviously, when I took a look at this, I pulled all the police reports and calls for service and took a look at all of them. And we couldn't change the matrix to not say assaults occurred, which is why you got a supplemental report that came into you probably late this afternoon. In looking at it, we're working hard to build a good working relationship with the businesses and to make sure that the bouncers and the doormen are comfortable calling us when they have a problem, instead of saying, we're not calling the police because this will get tagged to our business and then we'll be hauled in front of the Planning Commission. So I went through to make sure that the assaults, most of them, when we read the reports, are the bouncers trying to do their job, ejecting somebody, and then they're the victims in some cases. So we looked at those, we read through those, and so that's why you had a different recommendation, and it took 2 of the entities off your list. As far as the code enforcement, I just want to emphasize, it's all been a new experience to have a code enforcement out there, and what hours should she be out there, and what should she be focusing on. And she works for under Ken's direction, but obviously the police officers are out there at night and they work hand in hand with her as well. So I think we're still finding our way with that. I think she's just now hit her stride and really understands what the various CUPs are, and I certainly don't want to speak on Ken's behalf on that, but we are trying to strive to give her consistent direction and consistent application of what she's enforcing and what she's focusing on. So that's the reason why, from my perspective, I didn't put the code enforcement high on the list at this point. I think perhaps maybe a little more detail from her may be helpful to you, but and I'm not downplaying that, but it's the public safety issues that we really focused on in the assaults and those type of issues.
I totally agree with you, and I think that public safety, once again, is a matter of, is it 11:30 in the afternoon or is it 11:30 at night? So I believe it to be a big public safety issue, but thank you. Any questions for the Steve?
I have one question. Would you say that in the downtown area, things are getting better, about the same, worse than, say, the last year or so?
I think they're getting better, but because there's such a focus right now, is any incident that happens is getting magnified because everybody's reacting to it as far as council attention, some of the community members' attention. They're looking to say, see, we told you, see, we told you. And so you can't have the environment that we have down there and have everything be perfect, but trying to get the collaboration and cooperation. You're not going to force your way out of problems downtown. We can issue citation after citation for open containers, urinating in public. You've got to change the behavior and the culture, and that takes collaboration with the businesses and the police department. So that takes time. You can't change that overnight. I've been here a year now, and I have seen much more aggressive enforcement than we've had in the past. The numbers bear that out. I see a much better collaboration, and I think there is that level of trust developing between the business owners. We've been doing the responsible beverage service training for all of the employees, and that includes their servers, their bartenders, their door staff, and even some of their managers have attended. The police department has been at those trainings to make sure they understand what our roles and responsibilities are. So it's a work in progress, but we're heading down the road we need to head down. So I'm not saying it's perfect, but we're getting there.
Okay.
Chief, you have another enforcement, a civilian enforcement person out there too. How is that working out? And I'm not going to try to get details.
Yeah, we have one of our CSOs, our community service officers, that primarily are responsible for parking, but we pulled one specifically for Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. The initial intent was to focus on the taxi lines because that's where the fights break out, because people are going home, they've had a little too much to drink, and they're getting annoyed waiting, and someone cuts in front of somebody. So the initial intent was to focus on that, get that under control, as well as some of the behavior of the cab drivers themselves who are parking illegally, double parking, creating traffic hazards. Now we've got the added issue of Uber and Lyft drivers, and so that was what the focus initially was. We've extended that to include open containers, urinating in public, so there's no shortage of citations being issued, enforcement action. We're training a second officer to do that, and within the next few months we'll have all of our community service officers through that training. What we're doing now is doing an assessment to see how many should be doing that type of enforcement and how many should be doing parking. So we have a community services division manager that just started October 1st. Up until this point, we haven't had anybody really managing that. They're kind of catch as catch can under police supervision, so now they're going to have a dedicated person. So we'll have a better plan of how to approach things and longer term strategy that we'll probably be coming back to the council with right after the first of the year.
Thank you. I just want to share with you that I've seen the plaza from the early 70s all the way to today.
Me too.
And like most of
Me
us.
free.
I think we've all been there.
And the frustration over the last 15, 16 years, it just has built up to such a degree that maybe some of the angst that we see is based on inconsistent application of enforcement, inconsistent direction, inconsistent maybe political type decisions that ended up being non-enforced or more. I mean, right now, I'm sure some of the business owners think we're over-enforcing. So that's my observation. I appreciate the work you put in this. This is probably the best report we've seen, at least I've seen, on this issue for a long time. So I do appreciate the added issues that you have taken on, and not just in this document, but as you said, taxi drivers and so on and so forth. It does help because the overall feel of the downtown is a combination of all the issues. I mean, the bars can't be responsible for what the taxi drivers do, for goodness sakes, but everyone has a responsibility, and that's what I feel is that this is maybe the hot spot right now because it's just been under-maintained or under-managed by everyone, the bar owners, the taxi cab program as a whole, et cetera, et cetera. So.
I agree, it's not any one thing. We also made some recommendations, and we'll be pursuing that further, is some of the physical improvements. We need better lighting. Lot A feels grungy. I mean, it just feels sleazy when you're down there. There's no other word for it, and people don't like hearing that, but it doesn't feel good. It allows people to congregate more, drink in their cars, do a lot of things. And so I think better lighting is part of it. I think the camera project, which I know is controversial, will help with follow-up. We had a significant fight a couple weeks ago. We have no video footage. You have he said, she said, who started what, who saw who was involved, who wasn't involved. It's very hard to recreate things. Not to say it would have been prevented if the cameras were there, not to say anything would have been different, but we're trying to improve the overall appearance and feel down there, and the physical plant is part of it. Some of those bollards that are down there are impeding just the ingress and egress in some of the businesses. So we need to take a more holistic approach, and I think that's where the council's going with that, but obviously that's another thing that takes time, and you can't fix it overnight. But I think if people will let this process continue down the road, we're heading down the road we need to go.
Has the surveillance cameras thing passed?
It's coming back to the council in November. It got tabled for several reasons and some additional follow-up, and right now we're going to be coming back to the council with a type of camera that was asked, why didn't we look at a particular type of camera? And quite honestly, it's cost prohibitive, but we went and got the information, and we'll be coming back.
Is that the alternate source, the one for the newer cameras or something that has to be wired and it's not wireless? Is that the...
If wired cameras are cost prohibitive, because then we got to start digging trenches and cabling. So there's a whole series of issues there. The other issue that is proving to be a stumbling block is there are some people that don't want cameras under any circumstances. There are some council folks that only want them on the plaza, in parking lots, and nowhere else. There's no right answer here, but we either need to make a decision we're going to do it or we're not, because we're spending a lot of staff time on something that if we're not going to do could be better spent somewhere else. So we're bringing it back to the council in November.
Yeah, you're going to bring a plan out of what you think would work.
Correct.
Where they should be and all
Correct.
that. That's good. You're doing a great job, I think, for a year. I think next year it's going to be a lot better. I mean, you're doing the right things, I think,
Thank you.
to help our city.
I have one more question. Concerning the Hermosa Saloon, you said 4 assaults. Could you give us any detail, or would it take too much time, or, is it a situation where, there was a brawl or, big fights up there? I'm just trying to get a feel for...
There were 4 different incidents that I reviewed, and none of them were big brawls, but they were fights between individuals. Okay. In one case, they were individuals that knew each other. Another case didn't appear that they knew each other. 2 of them have police reports on file and wanted to pursue it. The other 2 kind of said, well, let me think about it, I'll let you know tomorrow, and then they didn't file police reports, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen, and we had witnesses that verified. So part of the problem at that location is there is no bouncer per se or doorman checking who's coming in. It appears they've got an employee that is kind of the be-all, do-all for everybody, and that's difficult when you have a crowded place. It's hard to monitor what everybody's doing.
Were these over a period of time? I mean, it wasn't...
during that 6-month period, this reporting period.
Right, but I mean, they didn't occur all the same night as
Oh, no,
the weekend.
no.
Okay.
If you give me a minute, I can tell you what the spread is on it. February, 1 in February, 2 in March, and 1 in April.
Mike, you had a question?
So you separated the saloon from Junkie and Malloy's based on you thought the 2 assaults at the other 2 locations were more of a bouncer preventing someone from coming in versus the bar itself being the central point of the fight.
Correct.
Okay.
That in conjunction with their service to an underage decoy and the lack of cooperation that we got from the employee.
Okay.
Chief, I have a couple questions. Now, given that you don't track the code enforcement, the two below the bar, there's three above the bar, Hermosa Saloon, American Junkie, and Patrick Malloy, and you kind of struck in the two for legitimate reasons. My question to you is, of those three, which ones would you recommend for CUP review?
At this point, it would just be Hermosa Saloon, and I think probably if we sat down with them and talked to them about having a better security plan or a better way to deal with problems when they arise. I personally have not sat down with them. I know one of my staff members did. So how involved you need to be at this point, I could certainly meet with them and come back and tell you whether I think you need to review their CUP or whether they're willing to willingly put things in place that could help.
Do you feel it would give you a strong lever if we agreed tonight to review that CUP?
You know, I think at this point they went before ABC, and they had to go for an ABC hearing, which was no fun thing to experience. So I think they probably have the message at this point, but that's certainly your call.
By the way, what was the penalty for their ABC violation?
You know, initially, and I can't remember now if their initial penalty was 20 and it got reduced to 15. They're probably here in the audience, can probably tell you. But they did get a reduction after their ABC hearing, but they were closed for a 2-week period.
But just to be clear on the answer, are you recommending any of these places be reviewed for CUP?
At this point, the only one that I think warrants a review is Hermosa Saloon. Whether you're inclined to allow the police department to sit down and meet with them or you want a formal review, that's your call.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions of the chief?
Thank you for the report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice
Good
job,
report.
chief. Okay, is anybody that this is a public hearing, so anybody can speak on it now.
Yes, my name is Paul Hennessy. I run the Lighthouse and Hennessy's Tavern, and since my name is being brought up, I felt it my duty to defend myself. The report that you were given shows that I have 6 violations. I've been in business in Hermosa Beach for 38 years now. I think I'm the oldest, not physically oldest, operator of businesses downtown. And for some reason, in the last year, it seems that I've become a very bad citizen. I met with the city on June 30th and disputed each and every one of those violations and pointed out to them that I felt I was unduly being harassed, myself and my staff. You had asked about more information on the times of the violations. I'd be happy to give that to you, including maybe Silvio's, since they are right next to me. My first violation was, as they have, hosing or water violation. What that was I had a maintenance man that periodically does our air conditioning in the beginning of the summer, and he was hosing the filters off on top of our building. So he got a violation, and then we were given a ticket, and when my manager asked him why we were getting a ticket for his violation, which he didn't even know he was violating anything, we were told because we hired him. So because we hired him, we were given a ticket, and because we were given a ticket, we were given another ticket. Now, the city did tell me they were going to remove that one, but it doesn't seem to have disappeared from my calculation. Obviously, he was doing repairs. He was doing maintenance on the building. But again, why I was singled out for that and nobody else in the area was, I pointed that out to the staff. I've got over 20 pictures here that I took in a 2-day span. Each and every one of you can walk down there any day and see water violations. One place that, and it doesn't matter who, but they're kind enough to put a yellow sign out, wet sign, or wet floor, after they hose down the plaza. So, am I being singled out? I believe so. My second one was an encroachment violation. During the due course of business in any restaurant, you have to move tables around, and children come in and throw a lot of crackers around, and we have to clean up with them. My staff put a table across onto the plaza while they were sweeping up or moving tables around to clean the area. During the day, it wasn't after 11 o'clock at night, and we were given an encroachment violation. Now, I think...
I'm not going to interrupt you. I'm going to let you speak as long as you like, but this is not a hearing tonight. This is, I mean, I guess you can, we have a kind of a 3-minute rule.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
no,
thought
no,
because...
it's okay, but we're not hearing your case tonight. We're just kind of talking about if we want to hear your case.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to stress that what's going on downtown, I don't think anybody realizes. They did provide me with what they're considering an encroachment, and I don't think putting a table on the plaza is an encroachment violation. I think if I'm walking from the beach with 2 beach chairs and waiting for a group of people, and we open our beach chairs and sit there, that no one's going to give them an encroachment violation. It clearly states it's unlawful for any person to construct or maintain or cause to construct or maintain any encroachment. Obviously, people deal with encroachments all the time. A table, temporarily, we weren't conducting business on it. It wasn't like we were sitting people at tables and doing that, as opposed to some other places down there that are beyond their square footage and are conducting business. So that was my encroachment violation. Banner violation I had during the World Cup. We had a cut out cardboard soccer player that we attached to the building, admittedly, and we had some string pennants there, admittedly, and I got, because I feel I've been targeted, I got a banner violation. Again, the next day I walked around, I've got 20 pictures of numerous banner violations where they got no tickets. I know for a fact, I did some research, there's banners down there right now after I showed the city that are still hanging up and no ticket was put up. I did receive a open window violation. In our CUP, we're supposed to keep the windows closed during entertainment. We have, I think, 21 windows down there and 2 doors. The reason for that, for the keeping the doors and windows closed, is to keep noise down. I think I am probably the quietest bar down there. There was no noise violation, but one of our customers had propped open the door, talking to someone inside. It was approximately 5 inches, and they ran in and gave us a ticket for having our doors and windows open. And I think the best one I received, I received a loitering violation, a ticket for allowing people to loiter on the plaza. I think probably that can go down in history as I'm the only one ever, actually, I think Sylvia's got one too, that was giving a ticket for their customers, which they weren't my customers. It was during the World Cup, where there was probably 15, 20, I don't know how many thousands of people down there, but I was supposed to move them off the plaza. I think, if the chief is still here, I don't think they can give loitering tickets on the plaza. If they could probably move the bums off that are sitting there, but instead they come and give a businessman a ticket for loitering. So those are the 6 that are there. And that's what's going on downtown, the harassment that is happening with the businesses. And for some reason, the council is confused as to why they feel that they have a reputation of not being business friendly. Anyway, I'll be happy. And again, Sylvia's, the table, they had, same thing, they were moving chairs around. He had, I think, 4 chairs on the plaza, so he got 4 tickets for a chair. I think if they want to continue that, they better go down to Martha's that has 50 tables on the plaza or on the city property that they provide for their people to sit down, because this is a beach community and every breakfast place does that, so that they can sit there, talk to their friends while they're waiting for a table, but there's no tickets given out down there.
How much are you paying for these citations that you got?
They multiply as you get a ticket for a ticket. Again, each one of these, you get a ticket for a ticket, so it gets up to $500, $1,000. I think Martha's, I've calculated, should be a $3,000 ticket this Saturday.
Okay, thank you.
Public hearing.
Good evening. My name is Kenny Garmo. I'm the owner of the Hermosa Saloon, resident here in town. I apologize to you guys if I'm not prepared to really talk to you about what's been going on at the Hermosa Saloon, but I was just notified of, my first contact with any of this was Monday morning. So I have not been talked to by the staff of the city, by anybody. I had to search out Tommy Thompson yesterday in order to get the police reports to even review what was going on. So I'm somewhat confused. If I would have been given an opportunity to talk with the chief to evaluate our strategy there at the bar, I would have been more than happy to do it. But like I said, no one has contacted me whatsoever. In addition to that, seeing that that these other two, apparently something happened since last night where American Junkie and Patrick Malloy were allowed to, behind closed doors somewhere, state their case and be excused. I never sat with anyone and was allowed to explain the circumstances that were now being reviewed for. So
Well, I just want to interrupt you because you're not being reviewed right now. This is just a public hearing to maybe consider you to be a review. And just so you know, you got it on Monday. Hey, we got it on Thursday night. So you had a 3-day rush on us.
Well, but my point is, though, is that if I have one assault on my premises, no one knows how the recording of all these stats is done. There's no communication, at least with me, from anyone down here, and then all of a sudden, hey, you've got 4 assaults. I mean, it would be nice to know if I had one assault so that I could address an issue immediately. I mean, I'm a resident of this town. I've got 3 kids in the school district here. I mean, I'm not going anywhere. I've been here for over 20 years. I mean, this is not, I'm concerned for the safety in this town and my bar. That's our #1 priority, is the safety of our customers. So I
don't understand. Are you saying that you didn't know that there were these fights in your bar?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that no one knows how the recording process works. One of the fights occurred behind our bar and in the city parking lot at 2:36 apparently in the morning. That's after we're closed. Another one happened in the middle of PCH. From reading the reports that I just, got from Tommy today, it doesn't even indicate that the people were actually in the bar on the one that occurred in PCH. One is a faceless, nameless person that didn't even call in until, they called in from their car while they're driving around and reported an assault, but then wouldn't appear to report it to anyone. The one that occurred in the middle of PCH was 2 guys that were apparently out there fighting with each other, and when the police showed up, they didn't even feel the need to make a report other than to say that it happened. So these are all things that would be very helpful for us to learn, to manage the bar, as if we had any knowledge of what's getting recorded and what's not. I mean, a guy calls from his car while he's driving away and then refuses to meet with the police. I mean, it doesn't seem to me like that should be reported here whatsoever. I mean, Has the commission had an opportunity to look at any of the police reports?
The only thing we know is that it says Hermosa Beach has 4 assaults. That's all we know.
And that looks alarming. Okay. I would ask that at the very least I be given the same opportunity that American Junkie and Patrick Malloy were given before being put up for review.
Unless I'm incorrect, the chief can correct me, I don't believe that you met with them. You reviewed the cases, or did you meet with them? I didn't meet with any of them. Okay.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading here where it says, all incidents reflected in this report were reviewed and discussed with the involved businesses. This is on the addendum page. Okay, well, that was, I mean, I had to search Tommy out.
All right, well, let's, yeah, we're going to, you know, we got your point, and we don't have side conversations, but.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, it's okay. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman Allen, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Deborah Fox. I'm an attorney at the law firm of Myers Nave. I'm a partner there. I'm a land use lawyer, practiced land use law for a good 30 years now, and also do a lot of litigation and constitutional issues. I'm here on behalf of American Junkie. Earlier today, we submitted a written letter via email. I think that came out in your supplemental package, and I delivered a handwritten copy when I arrived this evening. I want to make sure that the Commission understands the dedication that American Junkie has to the community and to being a good business owner. We appreciate the opportunity to tell you a little bit about ourselves. We did that in the letter. We felt that perhaps there was a shortcoming in us not being here and having you have an understanding about American Junkie and its reputation and its dedication to the business community, and partnering with your staff, and especially the planning department. I wanted to thank Chief Papa for the supplemental review that came out this afternoon. I just got it as I walked in, along with Lieutenant Thompson and Ken Robertson. I'm hearing this evening, and I would like to offer, perhaps we should have some dialogue about information, because what happens is you get this notice about a staff report, you have indications of police reports, but we don't know anything about them. So from American Junkie as well, when we received this, we had about 24 hours to obtain the police reports, to check our PAR incidents, and to then establish the circumstances that indeed these reports did not have any indicia of lack of security. So we'd like to think about a better system so that we have information. That way the Planning Commission as well can have the information, and we can know the facts that are indeed in operation out at the pier as to whether or not there needs to be any more review of the CUP. American Junkie has spent about $750,000 based on its CUP improving the area there. I've noted in the letter to you that we're going to move forward. We're going to spend another $20,000 on a roll-up door to mitigate the noise issue. We'd like to dedicate our resources to improving and enhancing American Junkie on the pier and not to paying my legal fees. So I think if we could get a better process for notice about the assaults or any other police reports that may come out of there, that we would be all well served. I wanted to also note that we brought the management from American Junkie here tonight who are in a supervisory role. That is both Thomas Moore and Josh Royal. They have been offering suggestions about lighting and issues in the parking lot A behind American Junkie. They are dedicated to improving the culture and to working with the police department to make that all happen. I did want to also put in context that American Junkie is the largest establishment down there. We employ over 100 folks. We have 7 to 8 security guards on the weekend. We have approximately, in the 6-month period for your review, approximately 91,000 customers in that 6-month period. So there's a very serious and dedicated effort to have that restaurant and a very lively and robust entertainment venue there, and we look forward to continuing in those efforts. We'd like to initiate some dialogue about how we can have a process to get earlier notification, then we can proactively address the issues, and we look forward to working with the city in that regard. We understand that the recommendation has been by both Mr. Robertson and your chief not to have any further information or review of American Junkie, and we're supporting of that, of course, and we offer our letter for your due consideration.
I have some questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
And these are things that I've observed over the last year that aren't in the staff report, but they're my own observations. And I'm sure you're not involved with day-to-day operations, so maybe the managers can answer these questions. But does the American Junkie still serve a drink called the Tower?
I don't know.
Does anyone, well, I'll describe it to you. It's a drink that's about 3 feet high, 6-inch cylinder filled with beer with a spigot at the bottom. And the question I have is, if that drink is still being served, and I have photos of the drink on my computer at home, but how does that make American Junkie a better restaurant? Because in your conditional use permit, it says you're supposed to be a restaurant. And serving a drink like that, although it's not illegal, it's not a violation of your conditional use permit, but to me, it just seems, I just don't like the direction that American Junkie has been going in since they began operation. And another thing that I've noticed is there's been a table tennis setup, customers playing beer pong, thing like that. Now, I don't know if they're still doing it. I haven't been in there the last couple of months. But we reviewed the floor plan, and when I was looking at that floor plan, I didn't see any games like that in the on the floor plan.
Commissioner, I appreciate your questions. I'll take all of them and discuss them with management and make sure that they are in keeping with their CUP and take a full review of the menu.
Okay, well, I don't have any other questions.
I just had one. The door that you've committed to install the October 27th, that's for the record, and it will be installed that week?
Correct. The building permit has already been processed and issued, and it will be installed starting on Monday, and will run the whole span of the front plaza.
You said it was issued?
Yes, that's my information.
Ken, was the building permit issued for the door on Junkie?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Anybody can speak on this subject?
Hi, Dave Lowe, President of the Hospitality Association. I just wanted to maybe give one bit of advice on when you're doing these reports, is that if you're looking at 4 assaults or you're looking at noise complaints, whatever it is maybe ask for the full text of that actual report, because there's a lot more to it, and you might be able to see that some of the stuff is ridiculous, that it's 11 o'clock in the afternoon, or something else that it might be even very obvious that it wasn't that place. So it's something that I don't think it would be a big burden on staff to add that actual text. They're usually 2 pages. It goes through and you can read some of the comments from the police officers, who was involved, all of that. And I think it gives you a little more context of what actually is going on with those, whether it's an assault or it's a theft or a noise violation or a code. I don't think they actually have those for the code enforcement, but there is some type of text even with the code enforcement violations. So if it's a overcapacity ticket, whatever it is, I just think that it would be worthwhile to get those at this point, as opposed to calling a revocation modification hearing to get that level of detail. And it would only be maybe the 6 items that meet those criteria. And that's just my only advice on that. Thank you very much.
Anybody else?
Sandy Seaman, Hermosa Beach, Chairman Allen, Commission, Planning Commission. Well, I went to the city council meeting and got waylaid till 1 o'clock in the morning because I thought we were going to talk about 50-50, and it was entwined by Ken Robertson with 6 other items and got lost and no one cared. But finally the council addressed it and voted 3-2 to keep 50-50 on the books, and requested that the CUPs be added to the review to be enforced, and then it said that possibility that the Planning Commission could look at the definition of a restaurant, its hours and whatnot, and then rework the entire thing, but keeping 50-50. 3-2 was the vote, and that was your job. It's never been posted. You guys have never talked about it. It's never been done. But here we are with a review, and if you look at paragraph 2, October 13th, 2014, Ken Robertson's taken the liberty to say that the city council has ordered you guys to discontinue all audits with the exception of the establishment. Well, the city manager asked to let the establishment go, then the city attorney asked the establishment to go, then Mr. Robertson asked to let the establishment go. And the city council said 3-2 again. The law hasn't changed, that there will be 50-50 and there will be audits till you guys all come up with a plan and send it back to them and they approve it. Until then, it's status quo. But it's not status quo. As a matter of fact, since they told you to go and do it, and they told Mr. Robertson to do it, we now find out that there's just an email and it's now 8 more weeks old. As a matter of fact, it says in here that he has now complied. The establishment has now submitted their reports indicating compliance, and now we hear that he hasn't even done that, and it's going to be another month, and then there's going to be a hearing. So you guys are really like the grand jury when there's a trial and a lawyer. If there's enough to be tried, and there's enough evidence to be tried, then you should have a hearing. And then all these reports and what happened, you can all get to the bottom of it and decide if they're merited. I don't think the issue prior to that. As far as the violations, it's really ridiculous. 2 of this, 1 of this. I watched this thing for 20 minutes, and frankly, all 3 or 4 of you were confused of what meant what, how does it work, how do you vote, when should it happen or not, and they're really unfair. Really, a restaurant can have 2 violations for an assault, but not be up for review until he got a hosing violation? Isn't that the most ridiculous thing in the world? And then in 6 months, it's thrown off the books. You know, when you violate your DMV, when you violate your credit, when you violate your criminal reports, they stay on your record for a lot longer than 6 months. These violations should be up there for a minimum of a year. So if you committed 2 more violations the next 6 months, we forgot the other 2. So he could have 4 assaults in 1 year, according to this report, and never be reviewed. If you're reviewed, the 50-50 audit, if you're a Class 47 restricted license, should be automatic. That's the telltale sign. And I commend Mr. Parati because he's really on to what's happening here. If you're a bona fide restaurant with a Class 47 license, you're restricted. And if you start having all these violations and all these noise complaints and whatnot, then you should be automatically audited, because that's probably the telltale sign that you're serving too much alcohol and not enough food, and you're not acting as a restaurant. Secondly, if you have these violations and you were audited, you think a restaurant with 91,000 customers in 6 months, with 3,500 customers a week, shouldn't be audited to make sure they're staying in compliance with their food to alcohol? Next, the reports that Mr. Robinson's staff or he has collected and signed off, I continually say, are inadequate and incorrect. His report says there is no 50-50 in your chart required for the North End Bar, and I've submitted to you right now, if you look at line 3 of the North End Bar's requirements, it says quarterly gross alcohol beverage sales shall not exceed the gross sales of food during the same period. Yet, after 2 years of telling Mr. Robinson about this, he has never changed this report. Also, when you talk about violations on the night of celebrating the Kings, there were over 150 people on Hermosa Avenue with 12 policemen, with the street and the entire community cordoned off, and I was out there asking policemen to write tickets, to issue noise and loitering, and not one ticket with people till 4:30 in the morning was issued. So the validity of these reports, I have to say, are erroneous. The value placed on them, if you look at Mr. Robinson's chart under Table 1, under ABC violations such as underage, violation of hours. Again, if you look at any establishment's license, there are many other conditions such as hours, like in the North End Bar till 2 o'clock in the morning, and 2, that they shall be a bona fide restaurant providing a menu containing assortment of foods and offers. So we've hired all this enforcement to be really to the restaurants, and one of the city council members said, well, maybe we should have a kitchen open till 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, that might take care of the problem. That's really unfair to the restaurants, to be honest with you. Any restaurant serving 3,500 people can put a $10 an hour guy in a restaurant and keep their kitchen open until 2 o'clock in the morning. That doesn't solve the problem. What solves the problem is what Mr. Perotti says. You got to walk like a duck, be a duck. If you're a bona fide restaurant and you've got how many ever people past 10 o'clock at night filled with your bar drinking, overabundance of alcohol and drinks, then you should be audited and you should have a review. The City Council voted 3-2 that you should look at the definitions of a restaurant. You should find a way so it's not arbitrary. I gave you the ABC rulings about 50-50. It's on their last page. It's non-criminal and it's arbitrary, which means you have the right to audit a restaurant for 50-50 at any time you elect to, without giving an explanation to them if you believe they are not a bona fide restaurant. But tonight we've convoluted what we're here for. You need to go back and scrap this whole thing, come up with a thing that's simple enough that you, the Planning Commission, and we citizens and the restaurant owners can understand, and they should have their fair say on their violations. And then if you determine there's enough to be a hearing, then you should have the hearing and let all the evidence come forth and let your decision then take place. Mr. Robertson wrote, per the direction of the council, compliance with the food alcohol sales is not an issue to be considered when determining whether to set a modification or hearing. I don't know where the City Council said that at the last meeting. I encourage you to go look at the Granicus. I encourage you to listen to it. They never said that. They said 50-50 is on the books. So this report and this document is erroneous in every presence of the way. It speaks in past tense that you have already done your review, that you have already redefined restaurants, that you've decided how CUPs will be incorporated, and you have then decided how 50-50s will be conducted and audited. And he has basically said it's water under the bridge and it's over. And that is incorrect. Last but not least, that all the conditions of a license of any establishment are part of the California Business Code. They're California state law, and this commission and this city council and their city attorney better start to understand that you guys have to uphold them, period. Just as you hold up closing at 2 o'clock in the morning, you have to hold up bona fide restaurants and the 50-50 rule. You cannot throw it under the bus. And last but not least, under violations of the ABC Table 1 under Ken Robertson's chart, really, a violation for hosing down equals a violation for ABC violations for underage and serving of alcohol, but yet there's nothing about over-serving of alcohol. The DMV says the most engrossed violation you can do is drive a car under the influence of alcohol, but yet we all know what goes on at all these restaurants that are acting as bars is that they overserve. And Mr. Parati again hit it on the head. What is someone doing with a drink 6 feet tall with a spigot at the bottom of it? Is because that restaurant is overserving. You need to look at the true restaurants that are really bona fide restaurants, look at their licenses and forget about all this other stuff. And by the way, running your water from your mats into the drain or the sewer is part of the health department. You can be cited and your rating from A goes to B. By doing so, she's correct. It has to go into a mop sink. So the city could simply just call the health department and tell them that XYZ's dumping their water into the sewer system. And not only will they get a citation by the health department, they could be closed, and their food rating should be going down. There's a lot better way to spend our money for code enforcement than running around chasing restaurants over mats. Thank you. Any questions?
Gentlemen, Ron Newman, Hermosa Beach. You know, one thing I noticed, there's not very many citizens here. It seems like there's always the same one that complains. But I remember the days when I used to come here and there'd be 50 people here. That's how things have changed in Hermosa. As far as violations, I'm in 8 different cities. 2 violations, 3 violations, this is ridiculous. Try to run a business, any kind of business, without having a problem with a customer. Someone has this problem, someone has that problem. I noticed when Sandy Seaman had his hot dog stand, he fought the city for every one of the 2 o'clock liquor license. Isn't that interesting? When it has something to do with his pocket. As far as 50-50, the ABC in the new ruling won't even handle these cases anymore because they can't win them. Half the restaurants in town are 50-50. The reason the council said that they didn't want 50-50 done unless there was other violations to go along with it, because you're going to have to audit everybody. Palmilla is less than 50-50, and it's a full restaurant. Dia de Campo is less than 50. People are buying these expensive drinks and expensive wines, and it's not like that anymore. And as far as mops, people washing down their mats, no one's washing down their mats anymore. As far as they wash them down inside. The city and the police and the code enforcement, they're out there all the time. If there's people doing that, they'll write them up. So, and I know you guys have a tough job, but just like the chief said, it's not perfect down here, but it's so much better than it was. And instead of everybody working together to make it, I hear, well, I'm not going to even picking on Ken. Ken's tough enough to deal with as it is. And so all I'm just saying is, you know, overall, you've got a bunch of pretty good people that are running businesses that are just trying the best they can. It's not easy. You know, Kent, dealing with liquor licenses and stuff in your business, and it used to be really bad down here. It used to be, people didn't pay attention, but they are paying attention a lot more. And thank God we have a great chief that's working with everybody to try to make it a better city. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Then we'll close the public hearing. And Ron, I did want to say one thing to your point. I was down at Lighthouse on Friday night. Started talking to the bartender. Just seeing how it's going. And he told me about something that actually blew my mind. I was so impressed, I called the chief to ask her about it. And what they did was that when there was a person that was a troublemaker, they snapped a photo of them and they sent it out to everybody else in town. And warning, all the people, don't let this guy in or this gal in, whatever it is. I thought that was really a really good example of something that wasn't directed by the city or the chief, and the chief kind of knew about it. And it's all happening underneath the scene. And so I just wanted to balance that out a little bit by saying we know there's good things going on down there too, and that's one prime example right there. Does anybody, we've closed the public hearing, does anybody in the commission want to say anything?
Yeah, I'll start.
Okay.
To continue on with the remark you just made, cities never stay the same. They're always kind of evolving. And especially if you look at cities over a 20-year period, not just 6 months. But I have reports that go back to 2006 when Chief Savelli first created the spreadsheet for us. Because up until that time, we knew there were problems, but we didn't have any documentation to take action. And I have spreadsheets showing that the total assaults for 6 months were probably 90 for the downtown area. It's probably 35, 40 now. But, and when you consider the last, I'd say 18 months, 2 years, the changes that happened starting on Upper Pier Avenue, the counter is now the fish shop, and then there's the hook and the plow on Upper Pier. On the plaza, there's Ron Newman's place up here. Then there's the Greenbelt. Over on, and of course, if you consider the changes, the Killer Shrimp, then over on Hermosa Avenue, you've got the standing room came in. Jed Sanford's place, I'm drawing a blank, replaced Cafe Boogaloo.
You did come.
And all these places are places where people of any age can go in and feel comfortable. It's not a place where, it's dedicated to 26 and under. And the places, there's still more coming. The Hibachi is going to be a steakhouse. Something's going on with Game Changer. Don't know. That'll be different. Fenner's is closed. Something new in there. Tiki Mon is closed. We'll have some new developments in there. Of course, when the Strand and Pier Hotel, whatever it looks like, when that's done, that'll be a huge change to the plaza. But although things in the big picture have gotten better, there are still things that, can be improved. Let me put it that way. I'm very concerned about what was going on with the Hermosa Saloon. 4 assaults with a place that small. I'd like more information on that. I'm kind of concerned, thinking of setting up a more formal hearing on that for a modification of their CUP with more investigation by the police chief and staff and the owner to find out more information on those assaults. The only other thing I want to mention is American Junkie, and I mentioned it earlier. I'm really concerned at the direction that place has gone. The Sangria was a unique kind of restaurant with unique entertainment, flamingo dancing on a Tuesday night, jazz on Wednesday nights. And when that restaurant was sold, a whole bunch of televisions were installed. It became more like a sports bar than a restaurant, more of a dance club at night. And I have a couple of copies of the Easy Reader. Once a year, they have in March the Best of the Beach. In the last 2 years, American Junkie was voted by their clientele as Best Dance Club, which is ironic considering it's supposed to be a restaurant and not a dance club. But, and I'll say this, which I don't generally say, but when Sangria was before us to have a hearing, to have that second bar installed, if I had known their restaurant was going to be sold and the direction that this new place is taken, I wouldn't have voted for that second place. I mean, that second bar. But there have been some interesting things, concepts that American Junkie came up with, and the photo booth I thought is kind of cute. You know, a lot of people getting their photos taken in there, and the ice cream cooler. A lot of kids like to go in there and take the free ice cream cone. But although I don't recommend any kind of hearing for on their conditional use permit, I am concerned in the direction that restaurant is going. And concerning some of the remarks I heard about enforcement on the plaza, in the past, the code enforcement officer was under a lot of pressure. He was holding down 3 jobs. He was the code enforcement officer, he was the senior building inspector, and then when we lost the building inspector, he was a building inspector. So naturally, you know, enforcement, I wouldn't say it wasn't a high priority, but you can only do so much when you're doing 3 jobs. And it's not like enforcement is just the downtown area. In my own neighborhood, we've had a code enforcement issue for the last 6 months or so. So it's a citywide problem, just not the downtown problem. So now that we have a full-time code enforcement officer, naturally, there's going to be more code enforcement. And whether it's done properly or not, that's for staff to handle and figure out. But that's why there have been more citations, just because there's one person doing that one job. But to sum up, I just think that you know, I think we should have a hearing on Hermosa Saloon, and the other places, you know, you're on our radar, and just leave it at that.
Anybody else want to volunteer to go next?
Well, I'll go in a little different direction. Some of what was described is uncertainty over the process and so forth. Part of it is because just what Sam was talking about, we've got information on code enforcement that we never had before. And quite frankly, that's a good thing because it's indicative of the fact that we have changed policies and increased enforcement downtown. But I think particularly Mr. Hennessy's explanation of what those 6 violations were, and I'm struggling with, if it's the code enforcement that's associated with a noise violation, then I'm really concerned about it. If it's a code enforcement that's associated with, and I'll take his word at it, with the random chance of seeing a door or window left open that really wasn't generating a nuisance, I'm not sure that's why we're, in all due respect, I'm not sure that's why we have these hearings and review all of this. So it was very instructive to me to hear his explanation of these. But I'm also wondering, and then the other thing, the chief talking about her decisions relative to the other two establishments, and then hearing from the Hermosa Saloon that they weren't part of, or didn't feel that they were part of that process leading up to this, and maybe that's some misunderstanding of what the staff report implied. I'm also looking at this, and to complicate the administration of this, thinking out loud, what if in fact this staff report was prepared for us in a month in advance, was circulated to everybody, including the establishments that were indicated, but we didn't discuss it? In other words, it was part of our package in October. We weren't going to look at this until November or December, so everybody had a month, including us, because the questions that we had about the code enforcement, we could have called staff, we could have worked that out. We wouldn't be here going, I don't understand, what do you mean by hosing, what do you mean by furniture on plaza, and how was this recorded and reported? And quite frankly, the master list is a little unclear to me. It doesn't seem to add up. The numbers here don't seem to add up with the matrix for the establishments that were singled out. If that was out there as sort of public knowledge, all of the operators had that a month in advance. We had it a month in advance. The chief had it a month. Everybody had it a month in advance. And we weren't going through this process of individually now going through Paul's, well, now what was the third violation? In other words, this has been all resolved. And then we come back to this and say, okay, look, we've now agreed the Hermosa Saloon seemed to have had a problem. It's been magnified, if you will, by the decoy sale. That may, in fact, be a problematic situation. Maybe there's been a change. Maybe that's, as Sam has suggested, maybe it's appropriate now to look at them. Patrick Malloy's was on here, but now it's off here, and that could have all been resolved, saving everybody sort of this sense of, gee, there's an uncertainty, there's over the process. I don't think that's what we're looking for. And this question over the 50-50 again, since Mr. Seaman brought it up, I thought I understood the direction of council to be pretty consistent with what was suggested by the staff in this case. He interprets it differently. It would be nice if we'd all had that month. We didn't need to do this in a public session and whatever, and get that straight. And that would have given me an opportunity to go back to, I guess Councilmember Berrigan has left, but I mean, she was here. We could have talked to her. I could have talked, certainly I talked to all the council people in between these meetings. I just am thinking about the process with the specifics of what we're looking at here. Again, I'm sharing Sam's reservations, concern over the Hermosa Saloon. I don't know, you see the point, obviously, given the policy, the way we do it, whether this would have been moved into a different category of the others two if they'd had time to talk to the chief and resolve this or not. So that's sort of my position right now. We've got some process questions as well as the substantive question, or substantive issues.
Ron?
Basically, I agree with Pete. I think that 1 month to review, and this includes the businesses, the staff, the public, the planning commission, and the police. If they have enough time to really digest all this stuff, maybe we could do a little bit better job on this. I think that would be a good job, because just trying to look at it in 3 days is not enough time. The only other thing that I would say is that I think there's one issue that's the most important thing of all, and that is over-serving. That is the key item that's really causing a lot of the troubles. And I think the police chief, by educating these restaurants and everything, is really good. It's at least we're starting something that's a training session, so they should know a little bit better about over-serving and about all these issues. And I think we're just at the beginning of trying to clarify this and making it a better community for the drinking. I really think that she's doing a good job, and that this suggestion of having some time to look at all these things so we understand them, and particularly the businesses, so they know that something's happening, and they have a chance a month to try to look at it, then everybody's getting a fair shot at this thing, and we're not just reinventing everything at our meeting. And that's what we've been doing.
I think I'd like to say that I think the rest of the comments by the other commissioners I feel very comfortable with some minor exceptions. Paul came up here and showed us pictures of his neighbors when he was getting singled out, his statement, and yet I truly know what happens when you get a citation for hosing and so on and so forth. The hosing is just not water running off the roof. The hosing is 6 o'clock in the morning, them hosing off the patio, and the patio water with the cigarette butts and trash sliding into the storm drain. The hosing is the back of the building where the mats are washed. Those are the hosing issues, and Paul has pictures of it. So I would say that Sam is correct. We have a lot of new, wonderful businesses down there, but we have a lot of slow learners that are some of the senior places. How many times do you need to get a citation to keep your door closed? How many years does it take before an $18,000 new door has to be installed to quiet us down? I think that the chief's explanation of the assaults and why one company came off and not the other, I accept. I think her judgment is good on that one, and it leads me to just talk about the saloon. But I want to preface, I worked for the saloon in 77 through 82. Under a previous owner, I was both the bartender and the bouncer. So, saying that, I have never met the other gentleman before that I know of, the owner now. I was proud of working there, and I'm sorry that they're having problems. But I would say I think the chief made an offer you can't refuse. I think the offer of meeting with the chief and trying to come up with a solution or an explanation or some way to mitigate. If the chief can't, then we go to a revocation hearing. But I think that's a fair way with this owner who doesn't seem to have all the details in his hand as of today, right now. So it's not because I work for him, it's because I think it's a fair way to go. But I think the slow learners out there need to reassess what they're doing. This is not something, when the new code enforcement officer came on board, we were introduced to him. We were told that the city was going to give written warnings. We were told that the city was going to meet with the businesses. We were told that letters were going to go out to all the businesses. Gentlemen, this is 6 or 7 months ago at least. The reports don't even start until March because it took a while for the code enforcement to come in. I also would like to tail in on something that Sandy said, that we have our particular position right now, and I'd like to have the chairman somehow consider too. Once we do receive and file this 6-month report, we're not using it again. I would much rather look at the next 6-month report in combination with this, because you'll see a full year of people being warned or noticed or whatever. I do agree it's a police issue with over drinking. Oh, I'm sorry, it's a business owner's decision to have over serving and what the police go through. It doesn't take long to get out there at 2 o'clock in the morning and see what's happening. I'm actually okay with all the other recommendations from the chief. And I'm amazed at Paul's explanation of each one of his citations. And I'm sure the chief will respond to that, or somehow they have already responded to, or Ken has responded to all the citations and either reduced them or eliminated them or upheld them. But to me, the simple little things that are nailing the businesses downtown. If you have a CUP that says keep your windows closed, keep the windows closed. If you have one that says don't put your furniture out in the plaza, don't put it out there. I know for a fact that I've seen one or two of the establishments at 11 o'clock at night take all the chairs and tables out of their establishment, put them in the back of the business, and use that as their dance floor. Yeah. We've all seen it. It's gone on for year after year after year. That's a code violation. So anybody that gets a citation on any of those issues, that after all this warning and all this notification, it's on you. It's not on us. It's not on the citation. It's on you. I have to admit, though, the 4 furniture violations or hosing for Silvers or Hennessy's, or 6 or Hennessy's, I don't have much angst over that. But I'd like to see 6 months from now, if he's still getting a citation, then I'm going to have some angst. So my thing on the saloon is I think the saloon should have an opportunity to meet with the chief, and after that, go from there.
Thank you, Mike. So it's been about a year. We had a hearing on the establishment, and what happened with the establishment when we were looking at him, the operation, they lost their liquor license. We said, hey, no big deal. We didn't want to revoke them, work it out. Then the 50-50 thing came along, and we said, hey, no big deal. Give them some time to work it, get that information in. Then it happened again, 3rd time. Then a couple months later, we got an angry email from one of the establishments saying that the Planning Commission's going to audit everybody under the sun, which was completely false. And as a matter of fact, I look at the establishment and I said, in fact, it never did one thing to him. We gave him every opportunity to comply, and this has gone on for years. We had a hearing, and the Planning Commission said, no big deal, go about your business. I got calls from 3 council members saying that the city manager said, well, we would have loved to have done something, but the Planning Commission refused to do anything, so our hands are tied. And so I'm faced here tonight wondering if the city manager is going to say, well, the Planning Commission didn't do anything, so we're not going to do anything. But having said that, I want to say, Ken, this is a good report. I really thought this was one of the best reports so far. It was 6 pages long. It was to the point. It wasn't stacked with all kinds of information. I thought it was a great report. You could write 30 pages talking about the 6-page report. But I did want to give you a little kudos to that. The hearing tonight is not about the criteria, which I still think and always have believed it needs to be reworked. And I agree with Mike on that, and I agree with Sandy Seaman's comment and on the year comment, and I do believe that we do need to continue to work on that report, knowing it's a living document. And to give you an example of why it's a living document, the document says that if there's going to be CUP violations, of which we have 2 establishments here tonight, that pass the threshold. We need to hear them. We need to hear Silvio's, and we need to hear Hennessy's according to our own document that we created. As far as the furniture and the stacking, I believe Paul. I have no reason not to believe him. I would still like to know the details of it. We heard one person's side. Years ago, we had a restaurant on the plaza that had many noise violations. Owners in the room tonight, I didn't know anything about it. I never heard anything. Nobody ever told me. And that's what we are hearing again tonight with at least one of the establishments. I came in here prepared tonight to say that every one of these establishments should be up for review. All right? They have all exceeded the criteria. Silvio's and Hennessy's, maybe there's some information about that makes these, I would still like to know, we heard from one of the owners, we didn't hear from Silvio's. We know there's furniture stacking. I believe, Paul, I want to hear the other side of the story too. As far as the first page of this report, the establishment, I am so sick of hearing about the establishment and their efforts or non-efforts. I read some public request document. This has been going on for years. And I would say to you right now, Ken, if that thing does not, if there is no compliance within 30 days, I want to bring that place up for a review. Again, we've already done it once. This has just gone on and on and on, and the staff has informed the establishment of the need to cooperate. Duh. It's been 2 years that they've needed to comply. My personal opinion is, I feel like I'd be singling out the, I would like to hear on the saloon. I think that should be open for a review. I mean, even the chief said that, scratching the other two. So basically what I'm saying is I would like to table Silvio's and Hennessy's to see the actual data of what it is. And I'm not saying it has to be in 30 days. This city staff works hard. I understand that. Just get it to us. But I would like to see what those reports are. They passed the threshold. They should be up for a CUP review by this body's own criteria.
Finish, but I've got a response to that. We need to be clear. It's not a mandatory review triggered by the numbers.
Okay, I don't want to get a call from a council member saying that the city manager told him that we failed to do our job, therefore his hands were tied. He would have loved to have done something.
Happy to
but
entertain the
his
city
hands
manager on that.
Yeah. So basically, I have what I'm going to say is I have several motions. Number one.
Can I say something before you make a motion?
Well, sure. Go ahead.
Huh?
Well, I thought everybody had their turn, and I was,
Yeah, I know, but
okay.
I just wanted to say another thing again that I said before. Say tonight, we got this report, and we don't discuss it, but we receive it. Then that's a time where everybody else gets notified what's happening, and they have a month to respond, to talk to the police chief, to do all this stuff, so when we have this thing, we already know what's going on, and the people involved in it will have already had a chance to review this stuff and have a fair fair meeting kind of a thing, and maybe we could make this a little bit more efficient.
I have no problem with that whatsoever.
Yeah.
I have no problem with tabling or continuing this item for 30 days. I think that's a fair thing to do. However, if somebody, you want to talk about it more, I have no problem with that.
Yeah,
because that's taking no action, but it's leaving it open.
Can do this in the time, and she can come back and tell us what's going on.
But the last time we took action, I heard from 3 council members saying, you guys screwed up. You failed to do something, and the city manager told them that it was because of you that he's not going to do anything. So I would be in favor of just tabling the whole thing for 30 days, unless we want to start making some motions, like a motion to review the Hermosa Beach Saloon and bring them up under a CUP hearing. That would be one.
Well, I'd like to see the police chief have an opportunity to talk to him. That's a fair thing, I think.
I'd like to make that motion then. Why don't we move forward with that one item, make a motion to have the police chief meet with the Hermosa Saloon people and report back to us. If you want 30 days, let's do 30 days from now, or whenever the staff is able to bring back any report from the chief.
Well, Mike, I wouldn't do it for one. I'd do it for all of them.
Yes.
Why would you single out one? I mean, are you saying that just wipe the slate clean on the other ones? Like,
No.
we heard from, we didn't even hear from Silvio's. We don't know if he was stacking out there at
That's right.
3:30 at 2:00 in the morning.
I'm trying to focus on what I consider the chief's determination of the 2 assaults on both of those places, where she mitigated those assaults to be less than something would go over the threshold. The stacking of the tables, good God. I agree with the fact that the businesses have to start complying, and I'd hate to go through a revocation hearing because somebody is stacking tables. But I have no problem.
I'd like to see the facts, is all I'm saying. We don't know the facts. We heard from one owner who said that his opinion, and we don't really actually know anything of that. We don't know anything about Silvio's. He failed to come up. He comes up here he comes up to these meetings, he comes up to the city council meetings, and he says he's tired of being called the bar, yet according to this, he's stacking furniture. I don't know if he is or not. We have no idea.
Okay, well, again, my motion would be to, on one specific bar, the Hermosa Saloon, to allow the chief meet with that bar, resolve some of the issues, and if they're not resolvable and they have to be continued to us for a revocation hearing, I agree.
Well, Mike, we heard the chief say that she wanted to bring this up for a revocation.
Okay, it's a motion now.
Second?
I guess we have a roll call.
Commissioner
I want to make sure that, just to clarify for myself and for everyone else, the motion is to continue the consideration of the Hermosa Saloon till our next meeting.
Yes. Or until an appropriate meeting where it could be heard,
Right.
giving the chief enough chance to meet with the business owner.
30 days ought to be enough.
Good.
And I'd like to speak to that, and also in recognition that the chief said, I think you need to bring this up for a revocation hearing. That's what I heard. So we're going to take her, and we're going to listen to her words and say, no, chief, you're wrong. You need more time.
If I can clarify. I said I'd be happy to meet with them and see if we could resolve it. I think it's in your purview whether to bring them up for revocation or not.
Okay. All right, so motion and a second?
Okay. Roll call. Commissioner Parati?
Yes.
Commissioner Flaherty?
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman?
Yes?
Commissioner Pizer?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen, yes.
Chairman Allen?
Chairman Allen.
Whoever you are.
Hey, Chairman.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion that we get the information from the city on Silvio's and Hennessy's, that we get the facts on what these 4 and 6 are. We heard from one of the owners. I would just like at the next hearing to just see what the items are. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
I'd like to speak to the motion. Considering all the things that go on in the downtown area, to me, stacking a few chairs on the plaza, I don't know, that to me is a waste of everybody's time. I mean, if staff wants to talk to business owners and explain to them, or clarify what they should or shouldn't be doing, but for us to get involved in people stacking stuff on the plaza when there's so much else going on and down there, I don't know, I think, I just think it's not very an efficient process, let me put it that way.
We should add to the motion then that we want to eliminate citations given for stacking and hosing. Why bother? I would like to add to it, is what I'm saying.
Well, then
Why should we bother?
I have to withdraw that second if you're going to do that.
Okay, I was trying to make a point there. But why are we issuing, no. Why do we get this on a chart? And why do we have it here?
Well, it's a question of severity. It's not, I don't think this was ever considered to be a mathematical process where, you have 2 dings and therefore you have a modification hearing. This was information to us to use our own judgment as to, how severe, what direction is this going. I just don't think I think the code enforcement is important, but, in itself, I don't think it should be criteria for a modification here.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but I'd still like to know that there was furniture stacked by these two places, according to this. One of the guys didn't even bother to show up. We don't know if it was in the alley. We don't know if it was at 12 o'clock at night
Right.
or 12 o'clock in the morning or 12 o'clock in the afternoon. We have no idea. And, I don't know if there's any fine associated with this, but what we're essentially saying is stack away.
May I ask the staff some questions?
Sure.
Well, if it's a citation, they pay a fine.
How much?
Well,
Staff.
I was going to ask, out of the 6 citations that we received that Paul walked through the issues with us, how many have been upheld and by your staff? How many have gone to court? How many have been rejected, et cetera, out of the 6 that we were referenced to tonight?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'd have to bring Code Enforcement Officer Rollins here, and he's not here tonight.
Okay.
What's the fine?
The fine is $100. And then, of course, it does ratchet up if there's multiple of the same violation.
Do all the citations allow the person who's getting the citation an opportunity to have a hearing before our hearing officer?
It's the same process we use for parking enforcement.
Okay,
yeah.
so we have a hearing officer
You have a
in-house.
hearing officer, right.
And, of course, that citation can also go to a court. So, okay.
I guess I would like to point out something the chief had said earlier. We are just kind of getting on our feet with some of these code enforcement issues. And I would echo what Commissioner Flaherty said. We have done more than some people may disagree, more than our share of warning these establishments, working with them. If you had Code Enforcement Officer Hill here, she would tell you all kinds of stories of multiple warnings and then the businesses that are cooperating. We're not reporting to you all that activity that goes on. It would be probably, it would be too much. I mean, it's really not the commissioner's role to get into that level of detail. So but again, we're getting on our feet. There's a lot of warning and we're getting a lot of great cooperation. But when we get to a point where we're issuing citations, it's usually because the warnings have not led to compliance.
Is there another step in between revocation hearing, modification, versus, I understand what the chairman wants to do. He wants to know more information on these 10 different citations.
I want to know if furniture was stacked at 11:30 at night or 11:30 a.m. That's all I'm asking for.
I mean, I'd be happy, Commissioner Allen, if you want to come down, I can have Bob meet with you. We can go over that stuff with you. I don't know if that's something that it doesn't. Maybe the full commission.
If there's not 3 people that care, it's meaningless.
Well, I think it's the kind of thing that when I was suggesting this month delay, those are exactly the kinds of questions. Right. I just would make one observation as we were talking here. There's absolutely no correlation between code enforcement violations and crime. Silvio's has no criminal reports of any kind, disturbances, anything on that matrix. Hennessy's has 1 theft, which I assume was a property theft within the establishment. I'm not sure that that's the kind of thing that anybody's going to look at and say, gee, there's a problem, we need to pull his permit. And he had 1 disturbance, and we don't have information on that. But again, has been pointed out again and again, very often a disturbance call is initiated by the establishment regarding a patron or whatever. So, I mean, to look at Hennessy's and say, gee, he had 6 violations, clearly there's a problem. I'm looking at the crime statistics, there's absolutely no problem. I'm looking at Silvio's. You're right, I have no idea what went on, and the information that's here is really, if Paul is correct, and I'm assuming that he is, when it says furniture on plaza and hosing, well, it was a number of other issues. But again, there was no correlation with the problems. And conversely, Hermosa Saloon had no code enforcement violations. And so this is, to me, part of the process. But the questions that you're asking, I think, are entirely legitimate, and especially if they'd correlated with You know, if Hermosa Saloon had had 15 stacking, let's call it, they'd been obviously clearing it out to increase occupancy or dance, and then had all these assaults, I'd say, gee, okay, there is a problem there. But I think this is why it's a discretionary review process triggered by these numbers. So I'm reluctant at this point to say, yeah, we ought to be going into greater detail based purely on this one statistic.
Can I say something?
Yeah, as soon as I do. I don't want to even hear about this stuff if we're not going to talk about it. Why do I care that there was furniture stacking on Silvio's and Hennessy's if we're going to say we don't need to? Well, that's something I would never do. What's the point?
I would do it for sure if, in fact, it correlated with a number of, if there'd been a number of assaults, there'd been a number of ABC violations. In other words, it's indicative of a lack of managerial control over the establishment that's contributing to the problems that this whole process is designed to correct.
Well, hang on. One thing that I'll say is that, like, when people, because they always say they're singled out. Every one of them says, well, I was singled out. I used that excuse when I got pulled over on 395. You singled me out of 20 cars. The policeman told me, he goes, son, when you go fishing, you don't know which fish you're going to catch. He goes, I caught you tonight. And so we don't keep track of all this stuff. And I will tell you, I absolutely believe Paul. There's no question about it. But we're taking it from him. We don't have any, you guys are telling me that you don't even want to hear about it. That's what I'm hearing. That you don't, that's just enough. Silvio's, he has these 4 things. Don't even want to hear about it, is what I'm hearing.
I'm also looking at Silvio's, and I'm seeing they had 1 officer check in 6 months. That suggests to me that the guys who are down on the plaza, the men and women of our police department, don't perceive there as being a lot of problems there. There are a lot of other establishments here that have double-digit checks, and they're the kinds of places that, yeah, we've got some issues in history there. Well, I think you have to take this in the totality. You can't simply focus on one thing, although clearly, if the one thing is a riot, an assault, a rape, a murder, whatever, then yeah, okay, that makes sense to me. Somebody that got nailed apparently for a code violation regarding a sign during the World Cup, he can pay his fine. I'm not concerned about pulling a CUP for that.
By that standard, American Junkie had 38 officer checks.
But again, we know well enough that the number of officer checks is correlated with the history of the establishment, the size of the establishment, the number of patrons in the establishment, and the potential, and if there are crimes, they're going to be reported here. We've all done ride-alongs. We know what the officer checks are all about, but if they don't find anything and they don't end up leading to a citation or leading to a problem, I'm not concerned about that in and of itself. Again, I don't think you can take any of it. It has to be a holistic evaluation.
Can I say something in a minute?
Sure.
Okay. If I were in the business, these restaurant businesses, and I only had 3 days or 4 days to even know that I'm in a problem, okay, with this, these incidents, I would think that it's very fair that these people be advised of what's going on and have enough time to discuss these things and discuss it with the police chief, to discuss it with others so that we can also look at it. So when we get to this, we're not going through a bunch of baloney all the time and trying to guess about what's going on. Then that we know the businesses have an opportunity to present themselves. They're not being pushed by a 3 or 4 day thing, and some of them probably don't even know what's going on. That they should at least have that period of time, and we should have the time to be able to sort of digest what's going on and know what to look for. Because it's really, there's a lot of things that probably aren't fair, and there's a lot of things probably that should be enforced, and that we could help the police chief or we could help other people to maybe recognize. So there's a lot of things that can be done, and if a 30-day period, say, can make this easier for everybody and more understandable and fair to all the parties, I think that's the best thing. We get the report from the police chief, and it starts there for the 30 days. So we have a system, and if we want something added to it, okay, maybe we find something that was missing, or we find something else. We can mention this. There's enough time to do this kind of stuff. So I just think it might be something that's very good for everybody. That's all. I'm just trying to look at it from a general thing, because we sit here and we try to make decisions, and how much time do we have to really know what's going on? So then we have to ask them to come back and talk and do all this other stuff. Let's have a plan.
Well, this is nothing, hang on, this is nothing new. We've been hearing about this I remember 8 years ago, one of the guys that's in the room said, I didn't know about any noise. Nobody told me. I heard a owner of a restaurant here that used to own Boogaloo said, I didn't know they were selling narcotics out of the restaurant. Nobody told me. So, it's a constant thing that we have our side, if you want to choose sides, that the other side says, gee, I didn't know. Nobody told me. I've heard this for years and years and years. So maybe it's time to change something.
Let me ask a question, if I could, of the city attorney. Is this an appropriate time for us to be making motions regarding the process, or should we be making, in other words, that what I brought up and what Ron's talking about, I think that's something that we as a commission might want to talk about, but I'm not sure that it's appropriate Brown Act-wise. That's not on our agenda, the procedure.
That's right.
Correct.
So we can raise that as a commissioner item to put it on the agenda?
Yes.
I agree with Pete.
In that case, I'll make a motion to receive and file the rest of the report, having noted that we've continued the consideration of Hermosa Saloon, but receive and file for regard to the rest.
Second.
Good.
So roll call. Commissioner Parati?
Yes.
Commissioner Flaherty?
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman?
Yes?
Commissioner Peiser?
Yes.
Chairman Allen?
No.
Motion carries.
Now to the easy part of the agenda.